When you close your eyes and picture Atlantis, what flashes through your mind?
For most people, it's that shimmering fantasy, right?
Exactly. Crystal spires, catching the light under the ocean, maybe some humming advanced tech. A kind of perfect paradise lost to the waves.
That image, that's the glossy pop culture veneer. It's the version that's been sold to us. But the actual history of this legend, going back 2,000 years,
Okay.
it's a sanitization of something much, much darker.
And that's the truth we're after today. We are not interested in the tourism video. Our whole mission here is to take this incredible philosophical allegory and just strip it back to the bone.
To show how it was hijacked.
Yes, systematically hijacked, mutated, and frankly weaponized across 2 millennia of Western thought.
Because the story of Atlantis, it's not static. It's this terrifying cultural palimpsest, like an ancient parchment where the original text is scraped away and overwritten again and again.
And each new layer reflects that era's deepest, darkest anxieties.
Exactly. So we have to peel back those layers, the occult, the technological, the political, to see what this thing really is.
And the one recurring theme in every single version is just chilling. The higher a society rises, the further and more violently it falls.
So we're going way beyond the simple sinking story.
Oh, way beyond. We are diving into the visceral realities people have grafted onto this myth. We're talking about the original blood sacrifice rituals.
The 19th century theories linking human degeneration to actual bestiality.
And then the 20th century stuff psychic death rays and the Nazi SS's pseudo-archaeological hunt for a master race origin point. This deep dive is about the absolute corruption of power and the human impulse to create a dark story to justify it.
So let's start with the source code.
Let's do it. Part 1. If we want to understand how the story got so twisted, we have to grasp the original blueprint. Where does the entire edifice of Atlantis actually begin?
It begins and ends with one person, Plato, the Athenian philosopher.
Right. Specifically, his dialogues Timaeus and Critias from around 360 BCE.
And this is the crucial foundational point that so many people miss. Before Plato, there is simply no known written record of Atlantis. None. Zero.
So despite what you might see on the internet, the academic consensus is solid. This was a work of political fiction, a thought experiment.
Completely. He needed an antagonist. He needed a villain so powerful, so wealthy, so morally bankrupt that it could serve as the perfect foil to his idealized, virtuous Athenian state.
Atlantis was designed to fail from the very beginning.
And Plato was a genius writer. So he creates this spectacular narrative frame to give his fictional story the weight of real history, a kind of unbreakable chain of transmission.
Okay, so walk us through that chain.
The story starts with Socrates. He's in conversation with Critias, who claims he heard the tale from his own grandfather.
Okay.
And his grandfather heard it decades earlier from the legendary Athenian lawgiver Solon.
Now that alone, just that lineup, Socrates, Critias, Solon, that screams authenticity to an Athenian audience. But there's one more link.
The final, most important link. Solon, this revered figure, supposedly got the story while traveling in Egypt from the priests in a city called Sais.
And the way the priests tell this story is a masterstroke of psychology.
Oh, it's brilliant. They start by insulting the Greeks. They literally tell Solon that Greeks are children who have no memory, that their history is too short to even comprehend the true scale of the past.
It's a classic power move. It immediately establishes the Egyptians as the superior source, lending credibility to the absolutely staggering claims that are about to follow.
And the scale is immense. Atlantis is located beyond the Pillars of Hercules.
What we call the Strait of Gibraltar.
Right, and Critias describes this empire as being larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. This isn't just an island, it's a continent-sized juggernaut.
And the timeline is just as insane. It's supposed to have existed 9,000 years before Solon. That puts it around 9600 BCE.
We're talking about a high-tech civilization in the Stone Age. It's pure hyperbole, designed to create this ultimate imperial power that was trying to enslave the entire Mediterranean world.
It's Athens' dark mirror, the ultimate expression of unchecked, aggressive power.
And what makes Plato's fiction so damn potent is the obsessive physical detail he packs into the Critias. He was clearly fascinated with geometry and hydraulic engineering, and he uses that to make the place feel so physically real.
So let's get into the details. What was the city actually like?
It was an engineering marvel, built around a central citadel. And this citadel was protected by a system of alternating concentric rings, 3 of water, 2 of land.
Which is a pretty sophisticated method of control and defense.
It's more than defense, it's power projection. Plato describes this massive canal, 300 feet wide and 100 feet deep.
Just massive.
Massive enough for the largest warships of the day, the triremes, to sail directly into the heart of the capital. This isn't just infrastructure, it's military infrastructure.
And the materials he says they used, they just scream excessive wealth and, more importantly, hubris.
Absolutely. Triple circuit walls. The outer one coated in brass, the middle in tin, and the innermost wall, the one around the citadel.
That one was covered in orichalcum.
Orichalcum, the famous mythical metal. Plato says it was mined on the island, second only in value to gold, and it made the inner wall flash with this lurid red light. It's a testament not to refined taste, but to, well, a kind of barbaric opulence.
And that opulence reached its peak inside the Temple of Poseidon in Plato.
The whole temple was a spectacle. The outside was covered in silver, the pinnacles in gold. Inside, it was just paneled with orichalcum, gold, and ivory.
And the statue inside.
A colossal gold statue of Poseidon, in a chariot with 6 winged horses, so enormous that his head literally touched the roof. It is the absolute maximum expression of materialism.
And it's here, in this temple, that Plato really drives home the point about their moral rot. He uses this visceral, disturbing religious ritual, the bull sacrifice.
This is where Plato shows his audience that the Atlanteans have fully transitioned from refined people to something barbaric. The 10 kings would gather, and they would hunt bulls inside the temple precinct itself.
But they hunted them without weapons, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Only with staves and nooses. And you have to ask why that specific detail, because it's not a clean ritualistic sacrifice. It's a grotesque, agonizing display of brute physical domination.
It's about raw power, not piety. And the climax of this ritual is just chilling.
It is. They capture a bull, and they cut its throat directly over a pillar of orichalcum. And on this pillar are inscribed the laws of Poseidon.
So the blood runs down and literally stains the sacred laws.
They are defiling the law itself. That's not a mistake. Plato wants his reader to see that this isn't just materialism. It's an active, intentional moral failure.
My God. It's a complete rejection of the divine contract.
And they double down on it. After the sacrifice, they mix a clot of the bull's blood with wine, and they drink it from golden cups while swearing their oaths.
Drinking the blood, staining the laws. This is Plato screaming to his audience that this society has completely lost its moral compass. They're savages masquerading as sophisticates.
Which leads to the mechanism of their fall. It wasn't just bad luck. Plato lays out a clear philosophical progression rooted in, of all things, ancestry and biology.
Explain that, the divine portion.
He argued that the first Atlanteans were noble because they retained the divine portion of their ancestry from Poseidon. They were wise, gentle, indifferent to wealth. But over generations, that divine blood was diluted with the mortal admixture.
Human nature, basically, with all its flaws.
Exactly. And the dilution, that biological decay, leads directly to greed, arrogance, and their rapacious desire for empire.
And that ultimate corruption is what drives them to launch an unprovoked war against the truly civilized world targeting Athens. That was the final sin.
That was the line in the sand. Zeus sees this wretched state and gathers the gods to decide their fate. And that's where the Critias dialogue just cuts off.
But we find out what happens in the Timaeus. The punishment is swift and total.
Absolute. In a single day and night of misfortune, violent earthquakes and floods hit the island. The Athenian army is swallowed by the earth, and the entire island of Atlantis sinks beneath the sea, leaving behind only impassable mud.
Swift, total, irreversible judgment. And that's the original source code. Hubris meets divine retribution, all designed to glorify a virtuous, non-imperial Athens.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've established it was political fiction, but Plato was too smart to just invent the idea of a sunken civilization from nothing. The terror of that, of a whole society vanishing overnight, it had to come from somewhere real.
It did. And that's the psychological core of why this myth has lasted. But before we get into the real-world influences, we have to address the geological elephant in the room.
Right. Let's be crystal clear about the science here.
A continent-sized landmass in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean cannot just sink. Not in 24 hours. It is physically impossible.
And why is that? It boils down to crust density, right?
It's basic geology. Continental crust is thick, like granite. Oceanic crust is thin, dense basalt. Continents literally float on the mantle like giant rafts. An entire continent just can't spontaneously vanish.
So given that impossibility, finding the real historical trauma that might have inspired Plato becomes even more fascinating. Let's start with the big one, the Minoan hypothesis.
This is the leading, most compelling scientific theory. It links Plato's account, to the cataclysmic eruption of Thera modern Santorini around 1600 BCE.
And the Minoans were the dominant power in the region at the time.
Absolutely. Centered on Crete, they were incredibly advanced. Multi-story palaces with running water, a powerful navy. They check all the boxes for a sophisticated island empire.
And the catastrophe itself, it has to match Plato's description.
It does, spectacularly. The eruption of Thera was an explosion with the force of hundreds of atomic bombs. The center of the island collapsed into the sea, forming the massive caldera you see today.
And that collapse would have generated
Mega tsunamis. These waves swept across the Aegean, devastating the coast of Crete, wiping out the Minoan fleet and destroying their coastal settlements. It's the ultimate fire and water destruction narrative.
So you have a sophisticated island empire destroyed by a volcano and a tsunami. The parallels are uncanny.
And there's more. Minoan culture had these extensive bull-leaping rituals, which is an obvious parallel to the Atlantean bull sacrifices. And Plato mentions Atlantis was built with red, white, and black stone.
Which perfectly matches the geology of Santorini.
It's a perfect match.
Okay, so if the parallels are so strong, what's the big hang-up? Why isn't it just accepted that the Minoans were Atlantis? It's the timeline, isn't it?
It's the timeline. That's the biggest problem. Plato claims 9,000 years before Solon. Thera erupted only about 900 years before. Many scholars suggest a simple translation error.
A translation error from Egyptian to Greek.
Exactly. The theory is that Solon confused the Egyptian symbol for 100 with the one for 1,000. If you divide Plato's 9,000 years by 10, you get 900, and that puts you right in the Minoan era.
Which makes a lot of sense. But there was an even more immediate source of terror, something that happened in Plato's actual lifetime, the destruction of Helike.
Helike is so important because it grounds the philosophical horror in contemporary reality. In 373 BCE, Plato was alive and working in Athens when this wealthy city on the Gulf of Corinth is just gone.
And it wasn't just any city.
No. It was the sacred center for the cult of Heliconian Poseidon, a city dedicated to the very sea god at the heart of the Atlantis myth.
And its end sounds terrifyingly familiar.
It was, like Atlantis, destroyed in a single winter night by a massive earthquake. The seismic activity liquefied the ground, causing the entire city to slide into the Gulf of Corinth, followed immediately by a tsunami.
Total submersion. If you needed real-world proof that a civilization could be wiped out in one night by the sea god, Helike was right there in his backyard.
And what made it so haunting was that the ruins were visible underwater for centuries. Sailors could literally see the ghost of a city beneath the waves. It was a physical manifestation of Poseidon's wrath.
It's incredible. But because science dismisses the idea of a literal continent, people today are constantly trying to find a perfect geographical match for Plato's fiction.
Which leads us to the classic internet age candidate, the rechat structure. The Eye of the Sahara.
Ah, yes. Visually, you can see the appeal. These incredible concentric rings in Mauritania, about 40 kilometers wide. It looks just like Plato's description.
It does, superficially. But the geological reality just deflates the whole thing. It's not artificial. It's a deeply eroded geological dome, a natural formation worn down over millions of years.
And its location is a bit of a problem for a naval empire.
A bit. It's hundreds of kilometers inland and at a high elevation. There's zero archaeological evidence of a harbor or a city or anything. The salt deposits people point to are just typical desert mineral evaporation. It's a classic case of seeing what you want to see.
And this is where we leave the world of philosophy and geology behind and pivot into the truly dark and fantastical. The 19th century takes Plato's idea of moral decay and accelerates it into this full-blown esoteric doctrine of racial evolution and magical warfare.
It's a profound and incredibly damaging transformation.
Yeah.
And it's engineered primarily by one person, Helena Blavatsky, the Russian occultist.
Founder of Theosophy, her book The Secret Doctrine from 1888.
For Blavatsky, Atlantis wasn't a political story. It was a cosmic chapter in the spiritual evolution of the human soul.
And central to this is her concept of the root races, a kind of metaphysical and physical roadmap for human evolution tied to lost continents.
That's right. Humanity evolves through 7 root races. The first few were non-physical or semi-physical. You had the ethereal Polarians, the Hyperboreans.
And the Lemurians.
Yes, the colossal hermaphroditic Lemurians from the lost continent of Lemuria. And then as the 4th root race, you get the Atlanteans.
And these are the first fully physical, recognizably human race.
According to her, yes. Giants with advanced psychic technologies, telepathy, mastery of energy, but their intellect outpaced their morality.
And crucially, the survivors of this whole cosmic drama, the fifth root race, are the Aryans, current humanity, who are descendants of a righteous subgroup of Atlanteans who fled before the end. That's the explicit and frankly damning racial linkage.
And it gets so much darker, especially when Blavatsky starts grappling with Darwinism, which she fundamentally rejected.
Right. She had her own unique theory on the origin of apes.
Unique is one word for it, grotesque is another. In her view, apes are not our ancestors. They are the direct consequence of human depravity and sin.
This is the part of the lore that most people have no idea about. This isn't just moral decay, it's a sexual catastrophe.
It is the official theosophical doctrine. She claimed that during the earlier Lemurian era, there were mindless men humanoid figures without a divine soul. And these mindless men copulated with huge she-animals.
My God. And the result of this first act of bestiality was?
The creation of monsters, specifically crooked red-hair-covered monsters. These, she argued, were the ancestors of the anthropoid apes.
And the Atlanteans, the next root race, just repeated the sin.
They renewed the sin of the mindless. They mated with these existing semi-human hybrids, and this second wave of bestiality in her worldview created gorillas and chimpanzees.
So in this theory, the great apes are our bastard cousins, living, breathing testaments to the sexual depravity of the lost races.
It completely shifts the fall of Atlantis. It's no longer Plato's subtle dilution of blood. It's an active, sickening corruption of the biological form itself through transgressive desire.
Which leads directly to how they were destroyed, psychic warfare.
Their fall was karmic. They succumbed to materialism and the worship of form, and they channeled their spiritual power into destructive sorcery.
Which caused a massive schism on the continent.
A schism between two groups of advanced psychics. The Lords of the Dazzling Face, the good guys, the white magicians, and the Lords of the Dark Face, the black magicians.
And they were fighting over the use of this energy called vril.
Exactly. Vril was this universal life force. The black magicians used it for dark, selfish purposes, necromancy, sexual excess, and dominating the lesser populations of the world. They were disturbing the entire karmic balance of the planet.
So the final sinking wasn't a punishment from Zeus.
No, it was a necessary, staged, cosmic cleansing event. The righteous Aryan seed had already been warned and relocated, and the corrupt continent had to be wiped clean.
It's a staggering narrative shift. Plato used blood dilution to explain moral decay. Blavatsky used sexual horror and corrupted cosmic energy to justify a racial hierarchy. The myth just got exponentially darker.
It really did.
And now we cross the Atlantic to the early 20th century, where the American psychic Edgar Cayce takes this esoteric foundation and fuses it with a profound dose of early sci-fi paranoia.
Casey, the sleeping prophet. His vision is distinctly American. It mixes spiritualism with aviation, lasers, advanced science. It's a very modern kind of catastrophe.
He gave hundreds of these life readings where his patients supposedly had past lives in Atlantis. What was the central piece of technology in his version?
It was the Twilight Stone, what he called the Great Crystal. A massive, six-sided quartz prism housed in a dome that could open to concentrate solar and stellar energy.
So it's basically a massive metaphysical power grid.
Exactly. Transmitting wireless power to their cities and their incredible airboats. Limitless, clean energy.
But like the anxieties of the developing atomic age, that power source becomes the instrument of their doom.
That's the profound 20th century fear, isn't it? Our technology will outpace our morality. Cayce said the second great destruction around 28,000 BCE was caused by the misuse of the Great Crystal.
How did they misuse it?
The engineers in their hubris tuned the crystal too high. They inadvertently turned this continental power source into a devastating death ray. The energy discharge triggered massive volcanic eruptions and literally split the continent into 3 large islands.
Completely self-inflicted catastrophe.
And the society that did this was bitterly divided. Cayce described 2 highly polarized factions locked in a philosophical and political war.
The sons of the law of one versus the sons of Belial.
The sons of the law of one were the spiritual elite. They practiced monotheism, meditation, service. They were trying to maintain that divine connection.
And the sons of Belial were the bad guys.
They were the dominant materialistic ruling class. They rejected divine law, focused purely on self-aggrandizement, power, and critically sexual gratification. Their moral bankruptcy drove the science of Atlantis toward pure corruption.
And this leads us to what is, for me, the most genuinely disturbing element Cayce introduced. the creation of the things.
But this adds a layer of bioethical horror that is just. It's
Yeah.
breathtakingly awful. Case claimed the sons of Belial used their advanced genetic science to create and then systematically enslave a class of beings known as the Things.
What were these things?
He describes them as mixtures of man and animal, automata or appendages. They were manufactured, semi-sentient beings created purely as commodities.
For labor in the mines and fields.
For labor, yes, but Case stated explicitly that the Things were also created and used as sex slaves by the ruling class. They were viewed as property, devoid of souls, fabricated for work and gratification.
My God, genetic slavery engineered for labor and sexual pleasure. That takes moral decay and twists it into something just profoundly grotesque.
It reduces sentient life to an industrial and genetic plaything. The existence of the Things became the ultimate sin that demanded a final karmic reckoning. The whole mission of the Law of One was to liberate these beings.
So the technology enabled the genetic horror, which provided the ultimate justification for their destruction. And before that final sinking, Case claimed they hid their knowledge.
The prophecy of the Hall of Records. Hidden, he said, in 3 places. Beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, in the Yucatan, and most famously, in the sunken portion of a temple near Bimini.
And he put a hard date on that one.
He prophesied that parts of the temples will rise around 68 and 69. So in 1968, when a formation of beach rock blocks, the Bimini Road, was discovered, his followers claimed absolute vindication.
Even though geologists have clearly classified it as a natural formation.
The power of the prophecy was too strong. The narrative demands a physical relic, even if you have to ignore science to find it.
If Casey's vision was disturbing, the next stage of its evolution is a genuine catastrophe. We have to talk about the most violent corruption of this myth, how the Third Reich used it to create a pseudo-historical basis for the Aryan master race and ultimately for genocide.
This is the darkest, most dangerous mutation. For the Nazis, Atlantis was no longer an allegory or a prophecy. It was the sacred Urheimat, the original homeland of the Nordic race.
The intellectual groundwork for this was laid before Hitler even came to power by the Volkisch Thule Society. They essentially merged Blavatsky's root race concept with the mythical northern continent Ultima Thule,
creating their own perverse mythological origin. In this ideology, Aryans didn't evolve. They were the pure, divine survivors of this lost polar paradise, a race of god-men of distinct biological origin, forced south by a cataclysm.
which served a crucial ideological function. It directly supported their belief that they were inherently superior to all other races who were dismissed as degenerate offshoots or the result of that bestial mixing.
It provided the historical depth for their racial vanity. And this obsession was fully institutionalized by the Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler.
Himmler founded the Honorby in 1935, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society,
which was this unique, terrifying organization, a scientific body, state-funded, but fully integrated into the SS. Its explicit job was to find scientific proof that Aryans once ruled the world and possessed lost Atlantean wisdom. It turned archaeology into a state-sponsored hate mission.
And their expeditions were far-flung and just bizarre. Himmler sent major SS expeditions to the Himalayas.
The 1938 expedition to Tibet. The Nazis believed that the Tibetan aristocracy might be the pure, uncontaminated descendants of Atlantean refugees who hid in the mountains.
And what the hell were they actually looking for there?
They weren't just looking for texts. They were literally taking precise measurements of people's skulls and faces, desperately searching for those idealized Nordic physiological traits they believed had survived for millennia. It's just ghoulish.
And they pursued this same idea of ancient Aryan colonization in South America.
Absolutely. An archaeologist named Edmund Kiss was sent to the ruins of Tiwanaku in Bolivia, and he just disregarded all established dating, claiming the megalithic ruins were millions of years old and built by Nordic Atlantean colonizers.
And as proof,
he interpreted the ancient statues, which are clearly indigenous, depicting white, bearded men. He claimed these were the Atlantean master race that brought civilization to the Andes. Just any complex achievement was automatically stripped from the local population and attributed to a lost white race.
What's equally surreal is their scientific explanation for how Atlantis was destroyed. They rejected mainstream, or as they called it, Jewish, physics.
They needed a pure Germanic science. So they adopted Hans Herbiger's completely baseless Welteilslehre, or world ice theory.
This theory is one of the most batshit insane concepts ever taken seriously by a world power.
It is pure fantasy. Herbiger claimed, based on a vision, that the Milky Way was made of cosmic ice, and that Earth periodically captures ice moons, which then crash down.
And this ties back to Atlantis how?
According to this absurd theory, the immense gravitational tides from a previous ice moon were responsible for sinking the Hyperborean Atlantean homeland. They embraced this physics-free fantasy specifically to reject the established science of figures like Albert Einstein.
It's the ultimate ideological weapon, science as justification for fantasy.
Yes, but the most important part of this is that the Nazi fixation wasn't abstract. It was translated into horrific industrialized programs of eugenics and mass murder.
This is the chilling operational link. If Aryans were the degenerate remnants of a divine race, if their blood was diluted, then the entire purpose of the SS was to breed back that purity.
To reverse historical decay, which resulted in the notorious Lebensborn or Fount of Life program.
This was state-sponsored industrialized eugenics aimed at creating the new Atlantean.
That's exactly what it was. SS officers were encouraged to mate with racially pure Nordic women in special maternity homes to produce children who would embody the lost perfection of their divine Atlantean ancestors.
Literally trying to bioengineer a return to a mythological golden age.
It was the industrialization of the Atlantis mythos. This program involved thousands of births, but even more appallingly, the systematic kidnapping of thousands of children from occupied lands like Poland and Norway if they had the correct Aryan features. The obsession with a pure Atlantean ancestor provided the twisted blueprint for genocide.
It's staggering to trace that line, from a philosophical warning about hubris to the mechanized horror of the Lebensborn program. But the myth persists, and the shadow of these racist tropes continues to fuel modern pseudo-archaeology.
Absolutely. The Atlantis myth has become this convenient vehicle for dismissing the achievements of non-European cultures. And the central idea that drives it is something called hyperdiffusionism.
Let's define that. What is it in this context?
It's the thoroughly discredited idea that major civilizations, Egypt, the Maya, Peru, could not have developed their sophistication independently. They needed a single superior mother culture, Atlantis, to spread the knowledge of architecture and astronomy around the world.
And the political problem is that it strips indigenous cultures of their agency. It suggests their greatest achievements were just a gift from an outside white savior.
It just recycles old colonialist tropes. Modern proponents often rely on the myth of white bearded gods, figures like Viracocha or Quetzalcoatl, who supposedly arrived by boat, taught the locals everything, and then sailed away.
And the roots of that particular myth lie in 19th century colonial ideology.
Directly. When European explorers found places like Great Zimbabwe or the Mayan pyramids, they often refused to believe the local black or brown people could have built them. So they invented lost white races, Atlanteans, Aryans, to explain the ingenuity away.
So modern alternative archaeology provides a convenient guise of just asking questions to perpetuate these discredited, frankly racist ideas.
It's an intellectual Trojan horse, and one of the most cited pieces of proof for the techno-Atlantis theory is the Piri race map of 1513.
The map that supposedly shows Antarctica free of ice?
Right. The argument is that the only way a map maker in 1513 could have known the coastline is if he was using source charts from a prehistoric, advanced Atlantean civilization that mapped the world before the ice caps formed.
It's a compelling argument on the surface.
If you ignore all the cartographic analysis, geographers who've studied it extensively suggest the Antarctic coast is overwhelmingly likely a bent and elongated depiction of the South American coast.
A map maker just running out of parchment.
Exactly. Either he ran out of space and bent the coast, or he was referencing a hypothetical southern continent, Terra Australis, which was common at the time. It's almost certainly a case of pareidolia, seeing a pattern where none exists because you desperately want the narrative to be true.
So to synthesize this entire dark journey, the history of Atlantis is a history of Western projection. For Plato, it was a subtle warning about political corruption. For the Theosophists, a terrifying fantasy of spiritual chaos, bestiality, and black magic to justify a racial hierarchy.
For Edgar Cayce, it reflected 20th century technological fear, with advanced science creating genetic slaves for pleasure. And in its most destructive form for the Nazis, it was a black mirror of racial vanity, providing the pseudo-historical blueprint for genocide.
The true significance of Atlantis, then, is not its location. It's its relentless persistence in the human mind. It embodies this search for a golden age that never existed, a manifestation of profound dissatisfaction with the messy, complicated reality of human history.
The lost city remains lost, not because we haven't found the right spot, but because it resides only in the most extreme and often the darkest corners of the human imagination, constantly reshaping itself to reflect our current sins.
The ultimate horror is that the most influential modern versions were obsessed with fighting the dilution of purity and reversing bestial mixing. They defined a superior race based on a mythological, uncontaminated ancestor. If the anxiety of our age is about unchecked AI, genetic editing, and global disparity, what new, terrifying incarnation of the sunken city might the fears of our time be constructing right now? Will it be a city of immortal, machine-integrated despots who reject their frail human past? That's the terrifying question the myth forces us to confront.